What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, where we continue to dissect America's most bizarre moral crusade. I'm your host, Jorge, and today we're changing channels to explore perhaps the most powerful engine of the Satanic Panic, the mass media machine that beamed devil worship paranoia directly into America's living rooms. That's right. We're talking about how television networks, newspapers, and talk shows transformed isolated incidents into national emergencies and convinced millions that satanic cults were hiding around every corner. So grab your remote controls and TV guides as we tune into this ratings-driven hysteria. All right, we're in the mid-'80s. A family gathers around their television set for the evening news, where a somber anchor warns about secret satanic symbols in children's cartoons. They flip channels to find shows featuring reformed Satanists describing ritual sacrifices. Another channel shows a made-for-TV movie about preschool teachers conducting black masses with their students. Meanwhile, newspapers and magazines compete to publish the most shocking headlines about the supposed epidemic. How did America's media transform from reporting the news to manufacturing mass hysteria? Well, let's take a deep dive. See, the media's role in the Satanic Panic began innocuously enough with legitimate reporting on unusual crimes. In the early 1980s, a handful of murders with occult elements received national attention, including the case of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who left pentagrams at crime scenes and claimed to worship Satan. What started as straightforward crime reporting quickly evolved into something more sinister. News directors and producers discovered that stories linking crime to Satanism generated exceptional ratings. By 1983, local news stations were airing special reports during Sweeps Week with sensationalist titles like Satan's Children and The Devil Worshippers Among Us. The media frenzy reached new heights when self-proclaimed cult experts emerged, offering their services to law enforcement, schools, and parent groups for a fee, of course. These individuals, often with questionable or non-existent credentials, became regular fixtures on television programs. Mike Warnke, who claimed to be a former high priest of a satanic cult, published his memoir, The Satan Seller, and became a media darling despite having no verifiable evidence for his claims. He would later be exposed as a fraud by Christian journalists who documented that he was just in the Navy during the time that he claimed to be leading satanic rituals. Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pastor, as we remember in the other video about they had the book Michelle Remembers. It was a book claiming that Smith had recovered memories of being abused in satanic rituals as a child, despite obvious inconsistencies and impossibilities in the narrative. Media outlets presented the book as factual, and the authors appeared on countless talk shows. See, these so-called experts were essentially creating a mythology about Satanism that had no basis in reality, and the media, either through negligence or cynical ratings chasing, presented these people as authoritative sources. Rough. I wish things had changed, but they haven't. Daytime talk shows became the most effective vectors for spreading satanic panic. The format was perfect. Emotional testimonies couldn't be fact-checked in real time, and hosts could feign objective concern while exploiting fears, and the daily need for content meant booking increasingly outlandish guests. Phil Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, and Oprah Winfrey all dedicated multiple episodes to satanic ritual abuse claims. In one infamous 1988 episode, Oprah told her audience, "This is something that is happening all over the country. It's not just in Manhattan. It's not just in Atlanta. It's not just in Louisville. It's everywhere. There are networks of these people." See, the pinnacle of talk show panic came when good old Geraldo Rivera aired his 1988 special, Devil Worship, Exposing Satan's Underground. It was watched by 20 million Americans. The 2-hour special featured Rivera dramatically declaring that Satanism is a plague on our nation, while interviewing tearful parents, alleged former cult members, and law enforcement experts. The special was so over the top that it later became a textbook example of irresponsible journalism, yet at the time, it was presented as serious investigative reporting. As Rivera himself later admitted, I lost my objectivity and I got caught up in the excitement of the chase and allowed my emotions to get the better of me. He had to apologize, of course. Then we go back to our friends at the McMartin Preschool. Perhaps there's no better case that illustrates this more than the McMartin Preschool trial in 1983. Going back to this case, it was about a mother, untreated schizophrenia, accused a preschool teacher of molesting her son and engaging in satanic rituals. These accusations snowballed into claims of underground tunnels, animal sacrifices, and ritualistic abuse involving hundreds of children. Local television stations broke the stories with sensational coverage that presented the allegations as fact. It was aired nightly with reports that created a template for how other stations would cover similar cases. The Los Angeles Times published over 400 articles about the case between 1984 and 1990, mostly presenting the prosecution side. Therapists used leading questions and coercive techniques to get children to disclose abuse that medical evidence couldn't substantiate. Parents watching the coverage became convinced their children must have been victimized too. The result? The longest and most expensive criminal trial in American history, ending with 0 convictions after 6 years. But lives and reputations were destroyed and a community was torn apart, all while the media profited from the spectacle. As one juror later reflected, we heard the testimony about flying witches and children being flushed down toilets to secret rooms and baby sacrifices. None of it was supported by physical evidence. The real crime was how the media convicted these people before the trial even started. The growing number of news reports was cited as evidence of growing problems. Created by a feedback loop where media coverage justified more media coverage. As folklore professor Bill Ellis observed, journalists abandoned basic skepticism and fact-checking when covering these stories. They treated rumors and urban legends as news and then cited their own coverage as evidence that something must be happening. The media's most damaging move was legitimizing self-proclaimed occult crime experts who trained police departments across America. These experts taught officers to look for signs of satanic crime, most of which were ordinary teenage behaviors or completely fabricated rituals. Kenneth Lanning, an FBI agent who specialized in crimes against children, became increasingly concerned about this trend. In 1992, he published a report debunking most claims about satanic ritual abuse and organized cult activity. Tellingly, his evidence-based report received far less media attention than the sensationalist claims that he refuted. Surprise, surprise. He said that after years of investigation, I've yet to find evidence that groups of intergenerational Satanists are murdering large numbers of people, breeding babies or sacrifice, or engaging in widespread conspiracies. What I found is a lot of people making money by spreading these claims. But by then, the damage was done. Police departments had created occult crime units. Therapists were recovering false memories of ritual abuse. And preschool teachers across the country were being accused of impossible crimes. The media-fueled panic had devastating real-world consequences. Innocent people spent years in prison based on testimony about satanic rituals that never happened. The Amirault family in Massachusetts, the West Memphis 3 in Arkansas, and dozens of daycare workers across the country had their lives destroyed by allegations that would never have gained traction without sensationalist media coverage. Mental health practices were corrupted as therapists began searching for repressed memories of satanic abuse, often implanting false memories through suggestive techniques. Families were torn apart when adult children, guided by therapists, suddenly remembered being abused in rituals by their parents, memories that forensic evidence couldn't support. The media created a market for stories about satanic abuse, and then therapists, law enforcement, and self-proclaimed experts rushed to supply those stories. The victims were the falsely accused and the genuine survivors of abuse whose experiences were obscured by fantastic claims. By the mid-1990s, the evidence against the Satanic Panic narrative was overwhelming. Investigative journalists, often from the same media outlets that had promoted the panic, began exposing the lack of evidence behind ritual abuse claims. The 1995 HBO documentary, Paradise Lost, raised serious questions about the West Memphis 3 case, showing how media coverage and public hysteria had railroaded 3 teenagers with an interest in heavy metal and the occult. In 1994, religious journalist John Trott published an expose revealing that Mike Warnke, the most famous ex-Satanist, had fabricated his entire backstory. His detailed investigation showed that Warnke was attending college and then serving in the Navy during the time he claimed to be running a satanic cult. As more experts were discredited as more accusations proven false, media coverage shifted. Talk shows moved on to new controversies, news programs stopped running Satanism specials, and journalists began the uncomfortable process of examining their role in spreading unfounded fears. The Satanic Panic presents one of the most profound failures of American journalism in the 20th century. Major news organizations abandoned fundamental principles of verification, skepticism, and balance in pursuit of sensational stories that would capture audience attention. The legacy of this failure continues to shape media and society today. Many journalists who lived through the era developed a healthy skepticism through moral panics and unfounded conspiracy theories. Media literacy programs now teach students to question sensationalist coverage and look for supporting evidence. However, the mechanics of panic, using isolated incidents to suggest broad patterns, elevating unreliable sources to expert status, and creating feedback loops of coverage remain visible in contemporary media. From fears about online challenges to panics about new technology, the template established during the Satanic Panic continues to influence how media outlets cover perceived threats to children. The ultimate lesson of the media-driven Satanic Panic wasn't about actual Satanism at all. It was about how easily fear can be manufactured, packaged, and sold to a willing audience. The real dark magic wasn't happening in secret rituals. It was beaming directly into America's living rooms every night at 6 and 11. So, if this episode made you question your media diet, smash that like button, hit subscribe, ring that notification bell so you don't miss the grand finale of our Satanic Panic series. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Were you convinced by those Satanic Panic specials back in the day? Did your local news run stories about secret Satanists in your town? Or were you one of the skeptics who saw through the hysteria while everyone else was buying into it? This is Jorge. Thank you for joining me on Jorge's House of Horrors.